to just talk about were two key issues. One is the government wedge, and the other is marginality. Marginality. Marginality is something that applies not just to economics. Jude Wanniski, the founder of supply-side economics, describes it in his book, The Way the World Works, saying that we learn marginality even in infancy, where we whimper when our diapers become full, but mom doesn't come change the diaper until she hears a scream. So the price is set. The negotiation is one clean diaper equals one baby scream. That's the marginal price, so to speak. I met my wife at 8,500. In order to qualify for one of the 33 cars in the field, they have bulk day, where cars are on the bubble. That's the marginal car. 33rd car is the marginal car. The straw that broke the camel's back is the marginal straw. The marginal straw is the straw that broke the camel's back. So what's so very important for those of us who are thinking about economics, but also about lots of things in life, is that we begin to think marginally. So very few people intellectualize their behavior in the first place, but to begin to think marginally becomes very, very crucial, because what happens when you have 50% of the vote plus one? Then you have a majority, and a lot of great things can be done if you need to have the power to get this done. So my point is that so often we forget to think marginally. That in politics is the art of addition. Russell Kirk tells us that, of course, that politics is the art of the possible. But part of politics is addition. You're adding voters. You're trying to grow the number of people that are voting for you. You're trying to expand at the margins, aren't you? And so often what happens is we forget that our message must be geared towards the margin. That doesn't mean, folks, is so often misunderstood today, that we should somehow become moderates or become marginal in our thinking ourselves. We don't want to become squishy centers. What the genius of Reagan, however, was what? That he was able to articulate conservative principles in a way that were attractive to those marginal voters. In no place more than Detroit is the Reagan dominance evident in the Reagan Democrat voters that were in Bonnier's district and down river. Those folks that had voted Democrat all their life said, I'm going to be with Reagan because, he makes sense to me, even though he was very, very conservative in the ideas that he had. So that's marginality. Please begin to look for the margins in everything that you do in life. I think you'll find them. The second thing is also from Jude Wanniski. It's the government wedge. And I think this is very, very important, particularly now when we are trying to discuss with the people in the center, the squishy center, but also our friends on the left. We're trying to explain to them why aren't jobs being created. Why do jobs get created in the first place? It is because men with capital, go and find labor because they have a relative expectation of profitability, correct? I always love the liberal, they says, those businesses are just a bunch of greedy people, right? And you always remember to turn that around on them and say, so you're saying that if there's an opportunity for them to make a buck, they're going to put their money at risk to try to make more, aren't they? Now you have the argument on your grounds, because then you can talk about, well, then why is it that we haven't seen jobs being created? And sometimes they'll say, well, a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines. A lot of capital sitting, and it is, right? Because the market and the actors and entrepreneurs and the enterprisers in the market hate above all else uncertainty, right? So what is the government wedge? The government wedge is what stands between capital and the labor. Workers can't find jobs because capital is not hiring them. You always should ask your liberal friends, when's the last time you got a job from a poor person? They think jobs come from the tooth fairy. What separates capital from labor is the government wedge. And the government wedge is essentially two things: the amount of tax and the cost of compliance with regulation. Now, our good friend Harry Verizer, in his book It Didn't Have to Be This Way, he's actually the creator. It is his idea, concept of the Austrian multiplier. Imagine a company that works at a 33% profit margin. when new regulations come in order to cover those costs, that business actually has to increase its sales by 3 times in order to pay for the cost of the new regulation. And so when we think of the government wedge, it's not just the taxes that are separating. And of course we know that America is one of the most highly taxed on businesses. We have one of the least favorable business climates in the industrialized world, but also the cost of regulations. And so when we consider the fact that Obamacare had 3,000 pages of regulations in it that would somehow affect businesses, there was an additional 30,000 pages of regulations written on top of the laws. So you have all this incredible uncertainty, and all that does is divide, it spreads that wedge that keeps capital from labor. The Austrians and the supply-siders understand that if you want labor and capital to come together, you must reduce the size of that government wedge. We must reduce taxes. We must make America the best place to do business again. And we also must free up the entrepreneur to innovate, and we do that by reducing regulations because the cost of compliance is so high. So if you understand the government wedge and you understand the marginality, then you can begin to understand why it is that businesses that are on the bubble, when new regulations come in, all those businesses on the bubble are no longer profitable because now the margin has shifted on them and they are now unprofitable and they go out of business, as do all the people that work for them lose their jobs. So